Hi, this is Allison Sheridan of the No Silicast podcast, hosted at podfeet.com, a technology geek podcast with an ever so slight Apple bias. Today is Sunday, May 4th, 2025, and this is show number 1043. Well, the 20th anniversary of the No Silicast is on the event horizon. For those who can spare the time, we'll be celebrating it during the live show on Sunday, May 11th, at of course 5 p.m. Pacific time, so be sure to come with your party streamers and noisemakers to podfeet.com/live. And if you haven't yet bought your 20th anniversary No Silicast shirt, head on over to podfeet.com/shop to get yours today. I put a photo of me and Steve wearing our new vintage navy and vintage black shirts. I love them so much, and many thanks to Alistair for helping me noodle out the design. One of the reasons I put the picture in is because navy, I would really call it like a dark gray, like a gray more. Maybe it's like a bluish gray, but it's a really pretty color anyway. Well, last week on Security Bits, you heard Bart explain how today's digital computers and quantum computers are fundamentally different in how they work. From there, he talked about how an algorithm has already been developed and approved by NIST that will still allow us to have cryptography to encrypt our sensitive data. I thought it was such a great explanation that I decided to publish it as a standalone chit-chat across the pond as well. I wanted to be able to point people directly to the conversation rather than saying, scroll to 42 minutes into the NosillaCast. It's really hard and everything. So I put a link in the show notes to that new episode of Chit Chat Across the Pond. And of course, in that episode, it links to the full Security Bits show notes so people can read along. Now you can send it to all of your friends. Well, this next CES interview is one that I really think after you listen, you're going to want to go back and watch the video because there's something going on in video behind me while I'm trying to do the interview with this guy. And it's hilarious and awesome and kind of frightening. But you'll get the idea when you listen to this, but go watch the video because it's pretty crazy. We're standing in a booth right now where there's a video of cats trying to drag animals, small prey animals, into a home. And Tom Rosinski is going to tell us about their device that's going to keep those little critters from coming in the house.
Hi there. Yeah, so I'm from OnlyCat. We've developed an AI cat flap. It's the world's most advanced cat door with microchip capabilities. So only your cat can enter. You can choose curfews, choosing what day, what times they're allowed to enter. But it's also got a camera, so when the cat approaches, if it's trying to bring prey or unwanted gifts into the house, it'll temporarily lock.
That's amazing. So let's back up a little bit. I didn't even know there were cat doors. I always thought there was only doggy doors.
Yeah, so obviously it depends on what country and geographic locations. In some places, cats tend to be indoors. In other places, so actually we're a UK-based company, and so in the UK, especially, there's many outdoor cats. So and sometimes for many customers, the prey deliveries can really become an incessant problem.
Yeah, I do remember our cat back in Michigan doing that, bringing just a row of tails. And that was nice. We really enjoyed that.
Yeah, we've got lots of different cases, and we've got at the moment just a few hundred devices out in the field, but they're working extremely well. And so we're in the process of now scaling up production to meet customer demand. And yeah, we've got cases of birds, mice, rats, snakes, voles, squirrels, lizards.
If you're listening, you should be really glad because in the background we're watching, there's a cat trying to bring a live rat in. We saw some kind of creepy worm. There have been birds, all kinds of things, but the OnlyCat is stopping the flap from opening when those animals are there. How's it doing it?
Yeah, so we've got a camera that's built into the device.
Can I turn this over?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can see here on the inside, we've got the camera and we've got infrared illumination. So we get good quality video footage even at night. And yeah, so faster than a blink of an eye, the system analyzes each frame for the presence of prey. And if the cat's trying to bring something in, it'll temporarily lock.
So how is it identifying something as prey and not a cat?
Oh, So it's using convolutional neural networks. So it's a image-based classifier and AI-based system. Thank you.
So it's actually looking to see what looks like a cat and what looks like a worm?
Yeah, so we've essentially fed it lots of examples of what a cat trying to carry prey looks like, and essentially the AI then figures out just extremely accurately, almost in a superhuman capability, to then determine if the cat's trying to bring something that it shouldn't be, and then lock.
I like that right now there's a cat bringing in a bird and it says contraband detected.
Yeah.
Oh, and that was just like a frog. This is a gruesome video to have on, gotta tell you. But it'd be even more gruesome. Oh, there's a lizard. It'd be even more gruesome if that lizard was in the house, right?
Exactly. So for many cat owners, when the cat brings in mice, sometimes it doesn't like eating the stomachs because they're full of acid. So they'll kind of just dissect the mice and then leave them on carpets or eat them under the bed, or
maybe they're still alive.
Yeah, so that can also be a big problem, having a rat that's then just let loose, sometimes half dead or alive, and being late to work, having to spend 2 hours trying to chase down an animal.
You also talked about people who are immunocompromised. That could be dangerous to bring them into the house, right?
Absolutely, yeah. We've got some customers who are undergoing chemotherapy, are immunocompromised, and so it's a big problem where they essentially, before we release the device, they're saying, well, if we can't solve this problem, we'll have to get rid of the cats. Unfortunately, as much as it pains us to say that, but other cases where people starting a family and then just finding a dead rat in a baby's cot.
Oh, jeez. I'm going to stop talking to you soon, Tom. Between the video and your examples, this is horrible. So what about, how is this installed into the home?
So it's just a drop-in upgrade for customers who already have a cat door. But alternatively, it's a relatively simple installation. It can be installed in glass, in windows, or walls. So we've got instructions depending on different use cases.
Very good. So this is called OnlyCat, which is a perfect name because you only want a cat to come in. Now, you said you're not yet in production. Is that correct?
We are in production, yeah.
So what's the price point on this?
So it's around $500 or half price with a $10 per month subscription.
Oh, that's an interesting way to do it. Pay once or pay a subscription. And the website is?
www.onlycat.com.
Very good. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Well, you could certainly hear how distracted I was during that interview. And again, go check out the video because it's pretty crazy. Whenever Steve and I take a major trip to a foreign country, I like to reflect on what we learned from a tech perspective. I didn't expect to have many observations about tech in Japan, but it turns out there's a lot to talk about. Our trip was on a tour by a company called Odysseys Unlimited, organized by UCLA Alumni Travel. It was a relatively small group with only 24 travelers and one guide named EK. On most of the trips we've been on, I find it enjoyable when people realize I know a lot about Apple products and they line up to ask me questions. Oddly, that pretty much didn't happen very much at all on this trip, which was, to be honest, it was kind of sad. One exception occurred when we went to the Hiroshima Peace Museum. At the entrance, there was a tall apparatus that had 2 digital clock displays. The top one said, number of days since the first dropping of the atomic bomb, and the second one said number of days since the last nuclear test. Every person walking in was compelled to take a photo of the clocks. However, the LED displays of the number of days were refreshing at a rate that was out of sync with the shutter speed of the camera. That meant that every single photo they took had half of the digits of the clock displays missing. Our friend Mike asked me, why is this happening and how could he fix it? I immediately knew the solution. I had him turn on live photos and retake the photo while making sure to hold the camera very still. I then instructed him to view the photo, tap on the word live to reveal the dropdown, and then select long exposure. Immediately, his photo zoomed in a little bit and then showed the number of days clearly. I was very proud of myself, but even more delighted that a group formed a line behind Mike, each person asking me to help them fix their photos. In case you're wondering, while we were there, it had been 29,111 days since the atomic bomb was dropped, but only 340 days since the last nuclear test. Now, I knew that Mike would need to enable live photos because of a question he'd asked me earlier. On the bus a few days before, he'd asked me how to permanently stop his iPhone from taking live photos. I explained some of the advantages of live photos, like making nice, smeary waterfall photos, but he was adamant that he wanted it off. He finally explained the problem. He has an iPhone, but he downloads his photos to a PC. Windows breaks live photos into a JPEG and a sidecar movie file, which he finds really annoying. I sympathized with him and I showed him how to control it. In Settings, Camera, Formats, you can change it from High Efficiency to Most Compatible. Under that setting, it explains that Most Compatible will use JPEG as the format. So I guess one person appreciated my knowledge. Let's talk about toilets now. Probably the most interesting tech difference we observed in Japan was in toilet tech. As you probably know, the Japanese are quite fond of the bidet type of toilet, or as EK playfully dubbed them, shower toilets. EK also called bathrooms the happy place. I'll be adopting that convention from now on. What surprised me was that nearly every happy place we visited had shower toilets. They were in hotels, shopping malls, train stations, and there was even a happy place out in the woods on a hiking trail that had a shower toilet. The other thing that surprised me was that about 80% of them had heated seats. Now I get why a heated toilet seat is quite comforting, especially on a cold morning. But in Japan, you don't have to turn them on. They were already hot when you sat down. Now think about the amount of energy that's being wasted right now by all those toilet seats being heated while no one's tushy is getting the benefit of that heat. I asked ChatGPT to do some research for me and help me do some math to figure out probably on average how much money is being wasted by toilet seats all being heated right now in Japan. And it was about 1.77 billion US dollars per year is being spent on energy to keep, say, half of those toilets still being heated right now. Now, if Japan used primarily renewable energy, it wouldn't have bothered me so much. But only 26% of their energy generation is from renewable sources. They have a lot of geothermal available, but the mineral bath folks have blocked the use of this valuable energy source because without any science to back it up, they think that their mineral baths will disappear if they use geothermal energy. But anyway, back to the fun of these shower toilets. Both of them had 3-ish buttons, 2 buttons to turn on the jet in 2 different directions, and 1 to stop the joy. Discovery of the flush button was a continuing adventure as no 2 toilets had it in the same place. There were electronic buttons, levers, twisty knobs, and even quite a few that flushed automatically. Now, some of the shower toilets were even more complex than others. In one, I found there was a little door I could open that revealed like 20 different buttons. As they were all labeled in Japanese, I chose not to experiment with those buttons. They were a small rectangular trough mounted onto the floor and sported a handle on the wall to help you support yourself. Evidently, this is an old traditional style that's still in fashion in some places. The reason I bring the squat toilets up is that their existence means that some folks are confused about how to use what I would call a normal toilet. I know that because many toilets had a sign instructing the right and wrong way to sit on a toilet, where the one with the red X showed a person squatting on a normal toilet. Now, you'd think, or at least hope, I was done talking toilet tech, but you'd be wrong. We stayed at some super nice hotels. One that was let's see if I can pronounce it correctly, a ryokan, which is a traditional Japanese inn. The beds were up on shin-height platforms, but resting right on that platform. So you had to kind of climb onto the platform and crawl across it on your knees to get into bed. It had a beautiful outdoor bathtub on the balcony, and a glass wall of the shower revealed a view of the forest. The inn also had an outdoor hot mineral spring called an onsen, and that was delightful. But of course, it is the toilet tech I want to talk about. On the back of a traditional toilet, you have a large tank where water pours in after the toilet is flushed, and then that tank empties into the toilet bowl when flushed. The water that comes into that tank is normal, clean water, but as soon as it's in a toilet, we wouldn't consider it clean. But what if you had access to that water supply as it flowed in, but before it entered the toilet? That's exactly what the toilet at the ryokan had. Where you would normally see the tank and, a closed lid, there was a faucet pouring clean water into a shallow sink. That meant you could wash your hands with the clean incoming toilet water and it would still be usable for flushing the toilet. I thought that was a brilliant reuse of water. In 2 of the hotel bathrooms, Steve noticed that the mirrors had rectangular heaters right in front of the sink so that when you took a hot shower that steamed up the rest of the mirror, right above the sink was a clear area for you to see your lovely reflection. I'm sure this is yet another waste of energy to have that heater on at all times, but I sure liked it. I'm just going to choose to assume that they were smart enough to have that heater only be triggered if the light switch was turned on. If you've ever had a very young child to take care of, and yet you find yourself in need to relieve yourself, you know that this creates a real problem. You can't fit a stroller into the toilet stall, and it's a real challenge to hold a baby while maneuvering your clothing in your body. In many of the bathrooms, there was a brilliant device to solve the problem. It was basically a baby seat bolted to the wall with a ring to go around the baby's waist with holes for their 2 legs. It was absolute genius. I want to know who's going to start installing these in all United States bathrooms. Now, this next one probably doesn't count as tech, but one sign really made me giggle in a Japanese bathroom. This particular bathroom was the one along the hiking trail on the island of Miyajima. The sign on the half-door gate said, "Please close the door to keep the deer out." It's just not something I see around where I live. Now, I had to ask NosillaCast David Bogdan about one thing I saw in many public bathrooms. It was a platform folded up against the wall with a sign showing you that you were supposed to rotate it down onto the ground. The mechanism wasn't mysterious, but I couldn't think for the life of me, what was this for? David explained that its purpose was to create a clean surface on which you could stand in your socks while changing clothes. I hadn't tracked where I saw these platforms, but I suspect they were in the many train stations, which would be a place where you might need to change your clothes. Speaking of clean floors, I'm sure you know that it's customary in Japan to remove your shoes when you go inside and put on some sort of slipper. What I didn't know before going to Japan was that they also have separate toilet shoes. Upon entering the bathroom, there are slippers you're supposed to change into from your house slippers. All right, that's another one that's not really tech, but I still thought it was interesting. With all of this high-tech equipment in public and private happy places, I was delighted by one facility that had a mechanical solution to the problem of knowing which bathroom stalls were occupied. Mechanically linked to the lever to lock the stall door were these little paper cardboard flags. One of them showed a blue circle for unoccupied, and the other one was a red X designating occupied. It was a simple mechanical solution, and it was so jankily done that I really think somebody had just done it to this one bathroom. All right, let's finally move on from toilet tech, but I thought that was interesting. Most sidewalks in the big cities had a yellow stripe in the middle that was maybe 10 inches wide. The stripe had 4 distinct ridges running parallel to the direction of the stripe. As NosillaCast and Japan resident Frank O'Carroll explained to me, they're for the blind. Think about how useful that would be to feel with your cane that you're walking in a straight line. It's genius. When something significant was coming up, like an intersection, the lines would run into a platform of bumps, also in bright yellow. When we walked into the train station in Tokyo, I noticed that the handrail had Braille on it. I guess it would be helpful to know which area you were entering, but the chaos of the Tokyo station was baffling even for the sighted. In a little bit, I'm going to be talking about the Shinkansen, which are the bullet trains, but on those, you have to be ready to jump onto the train when the doors open because they don't wait for you, and the same is true when exiting the train. Unless you're getting off at the last stop, you have to stand up, gather your belongings, and wait by the door ready to rush out and let the new passengers on. These trains are quite smooth, but standing in a vehicle that's slowing down can be a little bit wobbly. The top of the seats have handles with which you can steady yourself, and each handle also has Braille on it. I presume that this Braille is identifying the seat row and the letter. Now, elevators in the US often have Braille on the panels, but I've always wondered how you'd know where the panel was in order to touch it. Well, in Japan, the same raised dot pattern that was on the sidewalks was in front of the elevator's exterior buttons. Inside the elevators, the floors were identified with Braille on, next to the buttons, and there was even a horizontal pattern of elevator buttons so someone in a wheelchair would have easy access. When we were in Hiroshima, a gentleman in a wheelchair joined me in an elevator, and I couldn't resist the temptation to ask him, how well does this work for him? As he rolled out, he said that Japan was a very accessible country. I'm going to take that as a ringing endorsement. NosillaCast Michael Westbay also told us that his wife, who's in a wheelchair, has seen dramatic improvements in accessibility in Japan over the last 10 or 20 years. Things are getting really good, so that was fantastic to hear. All right, let's talk about power. When a nerd goes on vacation, the first thing they pack is their electronics and power bricks to charge those devices. If you're off to a foreign country, you have to study and figure out what kind of adapter you're going to need to use for that country. Who can forget the time I asked Bart on Skype before a trip to visit him in Ireland whether the adapter I'd purchased would work in the UK, and he said yes, it would. But I asked the wrong question because guess what? Ireland isn't in the UK. He assumed I was asking because I was going to be visiting Don McAllister in the UK, but anyway, he helped us out and gave us other adapters when we got to Ireland. So before leaving for Japan, Steve looked up their power ports and found out they're exactly the same as the US. What he didn't realize, though, is they don't use a ground pin, so they only have 2 prongs. For most of our plugs, the things that we brought, that was fine, but he brought a power strip with 3 prongs, and he wasn't able to use it. All right, let's talk about trains. Steve and I live in Southern California where public transportation is pretty sparse. A high-speed rail system was first proposed in the 1990s to connect Los Angeles to San Francisco. And in 2008, California voters approved a $10 billion bond to fund that 800-mile train system. They've begun construction, but by February 2024, this project was estimated to cost between $89 and $128 billion. I'm not terribly optimistic that we'll ever have a high-speed rail system in California. So it was a great delight riding the bullet trains in Japan. They're called Shinkansen, where Shin means new in Japanese and Kansen means main line. They called it the new main line when it was introduced in 1964 to connect Tokyo to Osaka, the very train we rode. Yes, 61 years ago, they had their first bullet train and we're still waiting. The Shinkansen averages 125 miles an hour between the two cities with peak speeds over 200 miles per hour. It was so much fun to ride. Now, the tricky bit is this train only stops for a couple of minutes, so like I said, you got to be in these starter blocks ready to leap onto the train before the doors close. Our guide, EK, told us that since we were such a large group, we needed to file into the center aisle as quickly as we could when we entered, not stopping at our assigned seats so we could ensure everyone had time to get on the train. Once riding, like I mentioned earlier, it's super smooth. Steve was at first concerned. He said, "Hey, there's no seatbelts." And then he said, "These speeds, would a seatbelt save you?" We also rode the local express trains, which were pretty snappy and super smooth too. One thing that tickled us was that all of the trains were electric, and one we rode was hybrid electric. As I mentioned, Japan doesn't have much renewable energy, with a lot of it coming from coal, so electric is better than directly burning fossil fuels. The hybrid train, which does burn some fossil fuels, has this cool graphic that showed us when the engine was driving the wheels, when the battery was assisting by driving a motor to the wheels, and when we were slowing down, it would show energy flowing back into the battery with regenerative braking. We loved the trains. Now, for the most part, we were able to communicate in English while in Japan, but there were many times when the ability to read Japanese would have been handy. Steve and I both got hit with allergies when we first arrived, those darn cherry blossoms, and we went on the hunt for some Flonase nasal spray. We found a box that looked a lot like the distinctive coloring of the ones at home, but I wanted to be sure. I whipped open Google Translate on my phone, set it to translate from Japanese to English, and snapped a photo of the box. Since I had an active internet connection with my GigSky eSIM, it immediately translated the name to say Flonase and said directly affects the 3 major symptoms of hay fever. Winner! Now, we did use it from time to time, reading signs and other things. And it was a little bit weird because as you move the camera's view around, it would sometimes change the translation, but overall, it was still pretty useful. When we first arrived in Japan, as I looked at the view from our high-rise hotels, I noticed that many of the buildings across from us had red triangles on every, say, 3rd window. I was curious what they were. At one point, I realized that the window out of which I was gazing had a triangle on it with the words in Japanese, or the window right in front of me. I whipped out my trusty Google Translate and discovered that the triangle said Fire Brigade Entrance, and below that it said, "Please do not place anything near this area." Mystery solved. And just about every historical site we visited started with the explanation, "You're viewing a replica because the original burned down in such and such a year." I mean, it was repetitive. Everywhere we went, they were saying that. Now, I noticed now that other fire-related things were sprinkled pretty much everywhere we went. In every hotel and historical site, we saw bright red lights with speakers where a fire alarm would blare should such an emergency arise. There were also green arrows with little green running person on them, prominently displayed showing you the safety exit. I had no doubt how to get out of these places. The most interesting tech we saw regarding escaping danger was a large metal box sitting on an upper-story balcony of a building on the island of Miyajima near Hiroshima. We were curious what it was, and then we looked closely at the graphic description on the front of the box. The graphic showed a woman opening the top of the box, throwing a sandbag out of the window, flipping out a chute, and then climbing on top of the box and jumping into the chute to the ground. No details were given on what would happen when she hit the bottom, but I guess hitting the ground was better than burning alive. Okay, this next thing definitely fits the category of tech. You know, most motel rooms in the US have an HVAC system built in, say, 1962, with dials that are mysterious and often don't properly control the temperature? You may get lucky and have a small panel on the wall that controls temperature, but they never seem to work that well either. And then there's the curtains that never quite close to give you full darkness, so you have to resort to Dave Hamilton's life hack of using one of the hangers designed to hold pants to clip the two sides closed. If you haven't ever done that, it's a great life hack. Well, the coolest hotel we stayed at was called the 1000 Kyoto Hotel. Their mission is to build a sustainable world for the next 1,000 years. Had a lot of really cool features. That's the place where the toilet flushed when you walked out. But we were baffled by the simplest things, like how to control the lights and air conditioning in the room. On the bedside table, we found an iPad offering to let us control our room, and that solved all of the problems I've described. The iPad had a bespoke interface with obvious buttons to control the lights, the air conditioning, our do not disturb status, set an alarm, and close the blackout curtain. I'm not sure this is the best interface for mainstream folks, but it was great tech for two traveling geeks. Now, we saw more robots in Japan than we do at home. To be fair, we don't see any at home. In a few restaurants, we saw them delivering dirty dishes back to the kitchen, having been loaded by the human waitstaff. In the fancy 1000 Kyoto Hotel, Steve ordered some ice to be delivered to our room using the iPad, and a robot delivered it to him. But the best one was on our birthday. Yeah, we share the same birthday. A robot delivered 2 birthday cakes to our table and sang happy birthday to us. How fun is that? Now let's talk a little bit more about traffic stuff. I was intrigued by the walk, don't walk signs in Japan. There's 2 little figures, one above the other, where the top shows someone standing still and the bottom one shows someone walking. On either side of the figure, though, there are vertical countdown lights that show you either how long you have to wait until you be allowed to cross or how much time you have left to get across. They work quite well, and I'd love to see them instituted in the United States. Now, it would seem that there's not much room for advancement left in elevator and escalator technology, but we found a few cool elements in Japan. I know this one isn't earth-shattering, but the fact that we didn't figure it out for 2 days kind of made us laugh. Many of the fancy hotels restrict you to going only up to the floor of your room. To tell the elevator your floor, you were to tap your key on a little pad. In one hotel, we would tap the card and then press the button for our floor, but we finally realized it was automatically lighting up. We thought that was kind of cool. Steve's favorite elevator tech, though, was that the button to tell the elevator doors to close worked immediately. Maybe you're used to that where you live, but in the United States, those buttons are practically placebos. They just give you something to do while the elevator takes its own sweet time closing the door. But these worked every single time. He loved that button. Now, we saw cool escalator technology that I'd also like to see done worldwide. In the 1000 Kyoto Hotel, there was an escalator from the first to the second floor where the dining areas were. One person in our party noticed that the escalator moved very slowly if no one was on them. But as soon as you got on, they would smoothly speed up. Think about how smart that is. When they're not in use, they burn far less energy moving the steps. You could have them shut off when nobody's on them, but that would create several problems. It would use a lot of energy to start them up each time, and it would possibly be a dangerous jolt to those who stepped on. And finally, how would you know they weren't just broken if they were standing still? Having it moving slowly, and then you get on and it speeds up so gently I didn't even notice, that was really cool. Now, everywhere you go in Japan, you'll see vending machines. Now, I don't mean like a single vending machine with just drinks from the Coca-Cola Corporation. I mean vast banks of them. We went on a walk around a palace, and there were 10 of them stacked side by side. They're massive. These things are everywhere. The other thing you see everywhere is convenience stores. I'm stretching the definition of tech here yet again, but it's very different from the U.S. Just about every other block had a 7-Eleven or a Family Mart where you could buy a fully pre-cooked meal and snacks and make a latte from a machine. Our favorite vending machine, though, was at a truck stop where EK let us go to the happy place. Steve and I discovered a vending machine that dispenses tasters of sake. You put money into one machine that dispensed tokens, sort of like Chuck E. Cheese. I bought the 3-token pack and that let us taste 3 different sakes. There was an attendant there who helped me choose dry sakes, and they were all delicious. We didn't have time to buy any sake there, but it was still a really fun experience. Now let's talk about cars. In some of the smaller cities, we saw a lot of these wee tiny cars by different manufacturers, but they were all kind of in the same form factor. An example was the Honda N-Box. That's N, the letter like as in Nancy. That's a great name for them because these vehicles are basically a box with a large passenger compartment, but just a tiny bit of car out in front to house the engine. I sent a photo of the Honda N-Box to NosillaCast away Michael Westbay, and he explained that you can tell the size of the engine by the color of the license plate. The photo I sent him showed a yellow license plate, which meant the engine is no bigger than 660 cc. As he explained, that means it's the equivalent of a mid-sized motorcycle engine. I was intrigued by these cars because they were so well suited for their job of carting humans around inside a city. They look quite roomy inside for the passengers while not requiring a giant gas-guzzling engine for city driving. On our last day, our lovely guide, EK, carefully deposited us onto the Shinkansen from Hiroshima to Shin, Osaka. Remember, Shin means new, so this is the new Osaka station. He had another guide meet us at the station and take us on another train to the airport in Osaka called Kansai International Airport. Kansai is unusual in that it sits on two man-made islands, built so the planes wouldn't bother people in the city. Sounds like a grand idea. Isn't some part of your brain sarcastically thinking, what could possibly go wrong? Well, you should listen to that part of your brain because the airport is sinking at an alarming rate. It opened in 1994 and had already sunk 8 meters, that's 26 feet, which is more than they expected it to drop over a 50-year period. To date, Kansai Airport has sunk 11.5 meters or 38 feet. In addition to that technical solution and ensuing problem, there's something else interesting about the Kansai Airport. In the United States, when you get to the airport, if you plan to check baggage, you go to the baggage drop-off for your airline. Well, our secondary guide had enthusiastically told us we would go to Section C to find Japan Airlines baggage drop-off. It was a massive airport, and after bidding our travel mates adieu, we managed to trudge our way to Section C, but we couldn't find JAL. I asked someone who worked for another airline at Section C, and she said, "It's not here yet." It's like, why? Is that like a language barrier problem? So I asked someone from another airline, and I got the same response. It's not here yet. We checked the big board ourselves, and it confirmed JAL should be at Section C. I'll cut through the mess and confusion and give you the punchline. Instead of every airline having a permanently designated baggage drop-off, all of the signage is temporary, and they rotate through the different airlines based on which ones have upcoming flights. We were at the airport more than 4 hours before our flight, so JAL had simply not yet been swapped in. By the way, I'm not talking about digital signage that gets changed. They had tall, square posts in front of each baggage bay with the name of the current airline on the 4 sides. I went up out to one to test a theory. I wondered if the names were magnetic, and sure enough, they were. People go up and peel these signs off and slap on the new ones, and all of a sudden, JAL can exist. We weren't very pleased with the situation to have to wait for it to exist, but I have to assume this allows for more efficient space utilization in a very crowded country. I had to tip my hat to their analog solution with magnetic names. I'm going to close this article about tech in Japan with the funniest thing we saw. We were in a store where we had to wait for an order to be filled, and there was a TV on to keep us entertained. The TV was playing the weather, and instead of a green screen display with the fancy weather patterns moving on it, it was a physical board with a guy moving little pieces of plastic around. He had like an arced one with little lines on it designating a weather front and this plastic yellow disc that I kind of assume must mean sunny weather. If you're old enough to get this reference, it was kind of like color forms of our childhood. Now, Michael Westbay got to see this article, and he explained that the yellow disc was not the sun. Here's what he wrote to me. The kanji on the yellow circle in the weather news says yellow sand. This is a weather phenomenon that often comes over from China. I thought it was their pollution when I first heard of it, but it's actually dust from Chinese deserts that blows over, causing a yellow haze to settle over several cities on the West Coast. That's why he also held the circle over the West Coast when the front moved east. The funny thing is, this analog solution, these color forms with the guy moving pieces of plastic on a map, was the national weather. This wasn't some podunk local weather station. Well, it's hard to bottom line such a diverse set of technologies that we observed for an entire country, but the Shinkansen was definitely our favorite tech in Japan. My overall impression was that Japan is more tech-forward than the US, and we could take a cue from much of their tech. Except maybe those analog weather maps. I nearly killed myself tripping over a fake plant in the Gardena booth, and I'm here with Dennis Kohler, who I think is going to be talking to us about robotic mowers. Yeah. Is that right?
That's right. So, robotic mowers, a fairly new concept to the United States. It's been around in Europe for quite some years now, yeah. But here it's pretty uncommon. So this is actually the first robotic mower that we have designed specifically for the needs of US customers. We used to sell robotic mowers for quite some years in the US already, yeah. However, it was the European models.
What's different about what an American lawn is versus a European lawn?
It's actually the types of grass that you have. Yeah? In Europe, we typically tend to have grass types that you really cut down, so you cut short. Yeah, that is nothing that consumers in the US actually want. Yeah, typically you want it a little bit longer, and you have various grass types which actually require it. Yeah, to be cut longer. Yeah, specifically in the southern area where you have these warm season grasses. Yeah, they need a longer cut. Yeah?
So it's basically the difference between boy haircuts and girl haircuts.
So to say, yeah, if you want to say so. Yeah, and so far we only could do the boy haircuts. Yeah? Yeah? And also you have a much bigger variety of grass types in the USA. Yeah, in Europe, I mean, we have just kind of, one or two different types, and that's basically it. Yeah, and here you have various types of grasses depending where in the United States you are with the different climate zones. Yeah, and one mower so far was simply not enough to cover all these grass types. Yeah, so this is the first robotic lawnmower.
Can we come down to this?
Yeah, sure, we can come down to this. Yeah. So this is the first robotic lawnmower that has been designed to cut basically all the grass types that you find in the USA at all different lengths that you need. Yeah.
So it looks nice in space age. It looks like something in one of the Tom Cruise movies, the one with the red ball, the car that he was in. It's got cool wheels and looks all space age.
Yeah. So it's it's no space age at all. Yeah. So let me show you a few features of that mower, yeah?
Yes.
We can also look underneath then. Yeah?
Oh, we definitely got to do that.
We definitely got to do that, yeah. So what you know what you would do? We will actually start with that, yeah? So
all right, we're going to mow this artificial lawn. Oh.
Let's move it around, yeah? Yeah. So that's actually what it looks like from below, yeah?
So I just see a circular
you see it,
non-blade.
You see it. So this is what we call the cutting disc, yeah? And this cutting disc rotates with around 2,500 RPM. Yeah, and we've got these razor blades here. Yeah, so they're really super sharp.
So do they just flip out under centrifugal force as it speeds up?
Exactly. Yeah. So you turn it. Yeah, and it's just the centrifugal force that pushes them to the outside.
Nice and simple.
Yeah, pretty nice and simple. It's also a safety feature because if these hit something, like a piece of stone or whatsoever, then they will just flip in.
Disengage, basically.
Yeah, disengage, basically, yeah. So that's the idea. I mean, this whole thing, it's a robotic mower, so it's an autonomous machine, yeah. Meaning that you don't need to be present when it works, yeah. It does the job automatically. Yeah.
All right, so we've got to talk about safety here. So little kid runs out in the yard or a small puppy.
Yeah.
What happens when this thing comes right at him?
When this thing comes right at him, yeah. I mean, it might hit it slightly, but it has super sensitive collision sensors, yeah. And it will immediately sense
only a little bit hit the child?
Just a little touch. It's going to be a little touch, yeah. So nothing serious, yeah. It will recognize it immediately, yeah, and just turn and go a different direction.
So kind of like if your Roomba hits you.
It's still right, exactly. I mean, still it's recommended not have the child outside when the robotic mower is running, but basically nothing can really happen. Yeah.
Okay, and it's not like there's any exposed blades or anything if it was to bump
nothing at all. No. I mean, it's just this. It's right in the middle. There is a lot of distance between the blades and the housing. Yeah,
and all the covers.
And
so I noticed these sort of there's like a comb on the front.
Exactly. Yeah. So the idea here is specifically if you cut high. Yeah. It's like a comb. Yeah. And it's also a protective feature, so no one can actually get the foot or a hand below.
Yeah, right.
But still, you need to get the grass through, so it can actually get to the cutting disc. Yeah.
Okay, right. And it's got just looks like normal casters on the back, but has big treads on the front.
Yeah, so it's it's front wheel drive. It's a front wheel drive, and it's got extra big wheels because if you, it needs to make its way through this high grass. Yeah, if you cut high, then you have like high grass like this, yeah?
Oh, right.
So it needs to get through. So we have these extra big wheels for that, yeah? And we have super powerful wheel motors, yeah? So it can actually go through. And
so I assume this is battery powered?
It is battery powered, exactly. We have a charging station here, yeah? So that's the charging station, actually.
Oh, one of the questions Steve is asking is, what about variable height? Like, can you change the height of the
You can change the height up to 4 inch, yeah? So between very low, yeah, and up to 4 inch.
How do you do that?
You do that. So we turn it around again.
Okay. Flip her over.
We flip it over, yeah.
Oh, there's some fun in here.
Yeah.
He's opened a cover on the top now.
Cover. So, and this is where you actually adjust the cutting height, yeah? Okay. So you turn that knob, yeah? You turn that knob.
It just goes from, it goes to 12. No, to 13.
Yeah. And when you look at the cutting disc, yeah, you see the cutting disc? Yeah. Now I'm going to turn the knob.
Okay.
Then you see how it's
really simple. It's just moving the cutting disc in and out.
It's just moving up and down, right?
Okay.
Yeah. And then we got a control panel here. Yeah. So this is a very basic control panel. We got a smartphone app for it. Yeah. Which offers much more opportunities to, do different settings. Because talking about this being an autonomous system means that you basically do a schedule for it. You program a schedule, and then it just does the job on its own.
Okay. Just like an indoor vacuum.
Like an indoor vacuum, yeah. And the cool thing about it is that in that smart app that we have for it, we have implemented an algorithm that considers the different grass types that you have here in the USA. Yeah? Because these different grass types, all of them require different treatment. Yeah.
So is that going to change is it going to be variable speed or something?
It's basically about the frequency of cutting. Yeah. So how often you actually cut it. Yeah. Specifically these grass types in the southern part of the USS don't require that much cutting, yeah. So maybe just once or twice a week, yeah. And then other grass types you can basically cut every day. The idea of a robotic mower is to work continuously. So it's not that you send it out once a week and then it does the job and then it remains in the charging station for the rest of the week. The idea of a robotic mower is to maintain the lawn at a specific length. Yeah. Right. So it works continuously. It always just cuts a little piece of it, yeah, which then falls down. It goes back into the soil. So this also means you don't need any fertilizer anymore.
And so you're not actually picking up the grass.
No, you're not.
It's just getting a trim every day.
Yeah, it's getting a trim every day. It drops back into the soil, and that's like a natural.
Naturally.
It's composting. It's a natural fertilizer to the lawn. You don't really need a fertilizer anymore. Yeah.
Okay, so it's when it needs to be charged, it goes back into the charging station.
The charging station.
About how much area can it do, or time can it go?
So area, now I need the help of my colleagues because 800 square meters, what is 800 square meters?
In freedom units. 0.2 acres.
2 acres, okay.
No, 0.2.
0.2 acres.
That's 0.2 of grass, right? So, so, it may be like a half an acre yard or something because you've got a house and you've got your driveway and other things on it, right?
We're listening to Matt Carden right now, and he's going to step in and talk a little bit about smart spring. Oh, wait, I didn't ask one question. Pricing.
Pricing, it's going to be $999 US.
Okay, that's a lot of lawn would be needed to be done to do that, but that should work. Very good. All right, so Matt's going to step in and talk about smart sprinklers.
Yeah, so let's talk about B-hyve. Maybe we can come over here.
Oh, this product has a name?
This is the Gardena Seleno Flex is the name of this one. Right. These products are B-hyve smart timers. Okay, so
I'm going to go right here.
Yeah, let me come over this way.
Here.
Okay.
Stay here. I'll go over here. There we go.
So we've got 3 different versions that we're showing today. We've got a couple of underground irrigation controllers. So this is our XR, and then we've got an indoor-outdoor over here as well. And then we've got a timer that actually connects to a hose faucet. So if you're tired of going out and turning on the sprinkler, letting it run and forgetting about it so it floods the yard, right? Or if you forget about to turn it on, then
that's if you've just got a simple hose sprinkler sitting out there.
Simple hose sprinkler, yeah. So you can just connect it. All of them are used on. You can use it on the app, right? So it connects to Wi-Fi. You can control it on the app. But where the real magic happens is with smart controllers, most people will overwater their lawn, right? Because they're trying to make it super green and they just don't know any better. But there is some science behind how much water a lawn should take, right?
That would make sense.
Right, exactly. So the B-hyve controller has algorithms built into it, and it connects to Wi-Fi. So it knows what Mother Nature's going to do, right? It knows how much it's going to rain, what humidity and some of the other weather factors are. And it's going to water your lawn and your yard in different zones accordingly.
Now, you haven't said the word AI yet. Are you sure you don't want to work that in here?
Let's work that in because this is definitely an AI system. You know, these algorithms work with Mother Nature. They're using artificial intelligence to know exactly how much to water. And if you think about it, you want that root zone to be moist, but you don't want it to be too moist because then you're going to lose water into the ground.
So is it somehow measuring underneath?
That's what AI does, right? It knows what Mother Nature's going to do. And so it has algorithms in the background that's running. You can get soil moisture sensors and put them in and connect it so that you can know exactly how much moisture is there. But the beauty of it is that it gets really precise without even the moisture sensors.
Moisture sensors. So how is it? This kind of thing has been on the market for a while. We have a smart sensor that knows it's going to rain today. I'm not going to sprinkle. What's new now?
Yeah, so what's really neat is we've got this Gen 2 that we're showing, which is our hose tap timer. This is a new product.
Never seen that before.
Yeah, and most people don't know about the hose faucet timers, right? We really pioneered this space. There's been a couple of other companies that have come out with them in the last couple of years, but we've pioneered the space. So it's got better connectivity. It just functions better than what we've had in the past.
So how much does the hose faucet timer cost?
So here's the beauty of it. All of these are WaterSense certified. So there are government rebates that are out there that you can get. So most of them, so this one would retail probably anywhere from $160 to $180.
Which is this one called? What's it by name?
This is called the XR. So it's this guy right here.
The whole smart indoor-outdoor sprinkler timer?
Yep. So
that's how much?
That's probably going to be between $160, $180.
That's really, it's really good. Yeah.
Yeah. But then you get the rebate.
Sure.
And it gets much cheaper. This one's probably going to be around $75 or $80.
And he's pointing to the smart Wi-Fi hose faucet
This
timer.
one right here, yeah.
Well, very good. This is really interesting. So where would people go to find out more about these products?
So they can go to orbitonline.com or Gardena.com, either one, and they can check out both products. Can I just add one last little...
Yes, you only have 5 seconds. Go.
Okay, so the beauty of both of these together is...
By the way, this is audio only too, so that's why I keep asking what you mean when you say these. You mean the sprinklers and the lawnmower?
The sprinklers and the lawnmower together, either one of them by themselves are going to be a little more eco-friendly for your lawn, and they're going to make the lawn more healthy. But we feel like there's real synergies bringing them together under one roof. And so you're going to see more innovation coming out, trying to combine that automated yard care in a way that's going to be healthier for the lawn, and that's going to really drive more eco-friendly solutions.
Very good. Thank you so much for your time.
Well, thank you.
So that was interview number 53 from CES. And as Steve pointed out, you can tell we're getting towards the end because my voice is so gravelly. 53 interviews so far, which means there's only one left, and we can finally start our CSUN interviews for you. Well, our hero of the week is longtime No Silicast and longtime supporter, George from Tulsa. Every once in a while, he goes to podfeed.com/PayPal, and he just drops me some money. But he always adds a funny little message. This time it was, weather report from Tulsa. I'm not saying I always understand his funny little messages, but I always enjoy them. Thanks, George, for your years of support and friendship and silly pictures. Well, it's that time of the week again. It's time for Chit Chat Across the Pond. This is episode number 812 for April 23rd, 2025, and I'm your host, Allison Sheridan. This week, our guest is the lovely Adam Engst, and I would like to congratulate him on 35 years of Tidbits. That is amazing, because you're only 28, right?
29, but who's counting? I mean, really? It is one of those shocking numbers.
That's huge.
It is like, how do you end up having done the same thing for 35 years? I don't know. I didn't plan it that way.
Impressively hard work. That's how.
Lack of attention. You like stop paying attention. You just keep doing things. I don't know. It's a possibility. It's a deep desire. Someone else asked me this the other day. It's like, it's a deep desire to make everyone think like me.
Oh, I like that. I like that. Well, I think you've come a long ways on that. You realize probably more than half of the people who read your work are younger than Tidbits.
No, it's probably the other way around, actually.
Oh, you think so?
Oh, yeah.
Oh.
Tidbits has a very is tweaked older.
Senior?
Senior. And the reason is because in 1993, when I wrote the first edition of Internet Starter Kit for Macintosh, all of the examples of like how to subscribe to a mailing list and all that were tidbits, right? And and the book was a huge bestseller and everything, and the tidbits audience grew radically during that time. So you figure, like, who had enough money and interest and whatnot in the early 90s to have a Mac and be on the internet?
Right. Not that many of us.
I mean, well, you had to be at least in your mid 20s to mid 30s
And a job.
in a job, right? So basically, I'm still younger, I believe, than most of my readers.
Wow. So you don't get new readers?
Not so much.
Well, you will because of this show.
See, there's a problem with the word. It's the reading concept that I think has more or less gone by the wayside.
Oh, that's interesting. I don't know about that. I have a lot of friends who and a lot of people just read my blog and don't listen to the podcast, and I think that's fine.
When our son was a teenager, he was absolutely befuddled that we could make a living selling ebooks and publishing tidbits. Just completely could not figure out how this could be because he didn't know anyone who would read, well, anything more or less. So
It seems like newsletters are coming back. In the last 5 years or so, I'm seeing a lot more people saying, no, a newsletter is a way to really connect with people.
yeah, I mean, I've been saying that forever, basically, because Tidbits has always been email, and I was like, email's where it's at. You control your audience. Like this is not you're not dependent on Google or we can talk about search. But it really does. It is a situation in which I think Substack actually kind of came along. I mean, it was multiple factors, but Substack came along when a lot of people were looking for a way to push their content to an audience. That the slight problem with blogs, of course, is that people have to come to you, and that doesn't get you the same kind of readership in today's world, I think. And so, people had gotten into the whole social media. That in essence, the social media site would be pushing at everyone, but of course, then you were at the mercy of their algorithm and their horrific policies.
Right. Well, we're actually not here to talk about how awesome Tidbits is, even though it is awesome. But well, we'll talk about an awesome article that you wrote recently. I think you coined this phrase. I haven't heard it called this. You coined the phrase AI answer engines and how you think they're worth trying. So let's kind of get into what you mean by an AI answer engine and what's the genesis of this.
I don't know that I can take credit for it. I mean, the only term which I had never seen before that I coined in this space is we have chatbots, and I for a long time they were separate from the ones that helped you make pictures, and so those I called art bots. And I'd never seen anyone call them art bots. Answer engines I feel like I've seen around, so I'm not sure I can take any credit for that at all. But nonetheless, yeah. So this is something which. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems to me, and I wonder if it's for you too, that there has been an increasing dissatisfaction with Google over the last few years.
Absolutely. To me, it's gone from something that was just second nature where I went to do everything in terms of search, and then it started to get more and more addy, and now it's basically forcing their AI engine on me instead of me getting to choose my own. And sometimes it's useful, but it's been getting a little bit better, I think. But it's not the search engine anymore. It just literally isn't.
That's definitely kind of what I've heard from a lot of people. My personal dissatisfaction with Google came from a slightly different direction, which was sort of in the midst of the pandemic, mid 2020 or so. It's like I hit a tipping point. I was like, I don't want to be tracked and recorded and monetized. And I understand full well what the trade-off is, that this is how Google makes their money, and they're in business to do this, and they do a good job at what they do, generally speaking, et cetera, et cetera. But with everything else that was going on, I was like, I can't deal. Like, I'm done. And it's like, I just need to be separated from this from Google search. And so I played around. I tried several other search engines, Ecosia, which Apple had put into one of its search engine list at some point. Obviously, DuckDuckGo, Bing. Didn't like Bing at all. DuckDuckGo is basically based on Bing, and although privacy is the kind of the core of DuckDuckGo, I just never really liked DuckDuckGo either.
Well, it didn't find stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
DuckDuckGo was, I felt real clean, but it was like, but I didn't get the answers to my questions.
Precisely. It didn't actually find stuff. And I think that's a lot of Bing. I never found Bing particularly useful either. And then around then, Brave, which does a Chromium browser, a privacy-focused browser that uses the same underpinnings as Google Chrome. They came out with Brave Search, which was their own search engine. And at first it relied a little bit on Google. And then as they kind of built their index and sort of figured stuff out, it became more and more independent. And Brave Search was pretty good. And I liked it. And so, this is my way of saying, okay, fine. I've divested myself a little bit from my dependence on Google. And I did that for a couple of years. And then at some point, kind of early last year, 2024, I felt like wasn't the Brave search was giving me bad results. Like, the results met my search, but what I was reading was bad. Like, the links that I was getting were just terrible. And like, 'cause I'm often looking for confirmation of something I know, or I think I know. So I'm like, oh, what date was the iPad? Was that 2009 or 2010? 2010. But just stupid little things like that, or how to accomplish some task, which again, I'm pretty sure. And so I'd get the result, and I'd look through the steps, and I go, well, that can't be right, and maybe it was just out of date. Maybe it was just wrong. I mean, there was a whole lot of wrong out there. And so, so I just became disillusioned with internet content. It was taking me more and more time to find stuff.
Did you find you were having to do more work to try to tailor your query to try to get it to give you the right answer?
No, it was more that I had to, the text was...
It was just still wrong?
It was just wrong. And part of it was, we all get this feeling, right? Or maybe we don't, but you go to a website, you've never heard of it before. It's got, there's always a certain kind of design, and the text is kind of big, and it doesn't really have a date, or it's always updated really recently. And you're just like, this is not a real website. Like, these people,
this is sketchy.
This is sketchy. I don't know where this is coming from. And and so there was a lot of that kind of stuff where I'm like, this isn't text from Macworld or even the New York Times, or tech stuff, or blog, actual individuals. This is just this site, which I don't know, maybe it's Asian or overseas somewhere. English isn't always quite right, but
somehow it's rising in Google's rankings.
And Braves, it's all the text is there, so I can see why, but it's not good. And so,
but it's supposed to be based on, at least Google was supposed to be based on how many people linked to it. That was the original algorithm.
I think that's a
right?
long time ago now.
Oh, I'm disillusioned.
PageRank, that was what PageRank was. And I think the Google algorithm is much, much, much more complicated now.
Sure.
And every time Google changes it, there is an incredible outcry, because some people benefit and some people, lose. One of the things that, and one of the most recent changes, I don't know, a year or two ago, maybe a year ago, Google decided to reward user-generated content. And so the practical upshot of this is that Tidbits Talk gets about the same number of hits as Tidbits now.
Oh, interesting. Where Tidbits Talks is your discussion forum.
Discussion forum.
Self-hosted.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep. And so, I mean, the content's all great. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying this is wrong necessarily, but we all know that people don't always have the information right in forums. So partly because, I mean, in Tibbetts Talk, I think actually people do tend to the information in Tibbetts Talk is often very good, except for the fact that there's always people asking questions because they don't know the answer.
Right. So it's not like, say, Stack Overflow, where the right answer has gotten a bunch of thumbs up that rank it and things like that.
There are ways of doing it. I don't know
a little bit of
could
that,
read
but
that.
yeah.
But yeah, right. Precisely. I don't have a way of anointing the right answer, and often there isn't quite that thing. There isn't a right answer. And and if someone says something which I believe is actively wrong, I will usually say, I really don't think that's the case, and here's why.
But that data's still in there.
Data's still in there because I'm not going to delete them because they were wrong. So again,
but isn't this what all the AI engines have been trained on? Is the collective knowledge of the planet, which is perhaps below average?
Well, I suppose by definition it better be average, but I don't know, maybe not.
That was my little jokey joke there.
I'm like, uh-oh, my math skills failing quickly. but seriously, I mean, it's an interesting problem, right? We want this. We sort of believe that there's this concept of correct information, and a search engine is all it's going to do is find you a page that contains information. It's up to you to go to that page and read the whole thing, and determine where the information that answers your question is, if it's correct, and then and that may be the entire point of the page, or it may be a tiny little comment somewhere down, 30 people in the comments, right?
Okay.
So
Right.
So this is the problem is these search engines in essence say, here's some stuff, go read it, you figure it out, and that was fine.
So you're
That was
spending
all
a
we
lot
had.
of time. This isn't an efficient way to search.
Yes, I mean, and it's all we had, so we didn't complain, right? It was good. So, but fast forward to, as I say, sometime last year, and Perplexity appears, and Perplexity says, what if I do this search, I find 10 results, whatever, sort of traditional search methods, and then I, as an AI, read them and answer the question that was posed to me.
And read more than one.
Read all of them. I'm a computer. I can do that kind of stuff, right? Very quickly.
Right.
I mean,
right.
It's not as quick as Google, because Google's got to like return a build a page and return it, right? That's super fast. The AIs actually have to ingest the information, run it through a chat bot, with the query that you have posed to them. So again, it's not they're taking the information and they're synthesizing out what you specifically asked. So it's very different than a search in some ways, right?
Right. Well, yeah, it's a search, but it's asking a lot more people than one or two.
Right. It was a lot more sources.
Picking what it thinks the best. It's
sources,
aggregating the collective intelligence.
And the sources one of the interesting things is Perplexity linked to its sources. I mean, one of the problems very early on with the chatbots, so starting in October 2023 when ChatGPT hits, is they make stuff up. That they just have incorrect information. And some of that's because they were fed incorrect information in their models. Sometimes it's the way the statistical groupings work out that, incorrect things get put together. But we used to be, very early on, you could ask ChatGPT to, cite its sources, and it would make up URLs. Like it was just like, here's a perfectly reasonable looking URL. It doesn't go anywhere.
That's amazing.
But so what Perplexity did is it turned that whole model on its head and said, I'm actually literally going to do the search, and then I will assemble my answer out of the contents of those searches, and I will provide references to where I got those pieces of information. And so what's interesting is when you follow a link, which you can always do in Perplexity, to see where it got the information, sometimes you go, oh, well, that's sort of weird. Why did you link to this one? And it may be because it's getting like different portions of the answer from a page that is not primarily about your question.
Okay.
Right? Because again, sometimes the answer to your question is the 29th comment on some article.
Mm-hmm.
So you get this article, like, why did you link to this? Oh, well, because down here, right, this little bit here is what actually answers your question. So that's the kind of thing
You get real good
that you
at
can do.
Command F to look for the search term you asked for.
You can do, yeah. I mean, you can do some of that if you really want to trace it down. But what I found was that first Perplexity I had used for a while, and then ChatGPT added web search. And then, it's sort of the floodgates opened, and Google came out with AI. It's Google AI Mode, which is a Search Labs feature. So it's not the Google AI that you see at the top of the normal Google search, but it's a chatty one. It's a chatbot based kind of AI.
What's the difference?
It doesn't show you the list of links primarily.
Okay.
It links to them, but they're sort of off in a sidebar. And
this is where I'm a little confused on this whole idea of searching versus talking to. How do I tell any of these systems I want to do a web search versus what it's normally doing, which is creating an answer?
So, and just to say that Claude also, towards the end of this, added this feature as well. So the two big bots, ChatGPT and Claude, and then Perplexity has long done it. So those are the big three, and then Google had this Search Labs thing. So to answer your question, though, they usually just Perplexity, everything is a search.
Okay.
Unless you ask but Perplexity, I shouldn't say that. It is possible to do something in Perplexity that it will not create a search from because it does have an LLM behind it.
Okay, so I could ask maybe all of these, rewrite this sentence for me.
Yes.
And that would not be a web search.
That would not be a web search.
But if I say, when was the iPad introduced, they will automatically do a web search.
Well, so that's the question. So Perplexity will. ChatGPT usually will. And Claude usually won't.
Okay.
And so, just earlier today, in fact, in fact, I was a friend of mine was asking, what the relationship was between the Syracuse Chargers and the Syracuse Track Club, which are two running clubs in Syracuse nearby. And he said, "Oh, it looks like the track club is like a subgroup of the Chargers." I'm like, "No, that's totally not true. I mean, I know this fact." But he showed me the what Google's summary response. It just completely got it wrong. And I asked ChatGPT the same question. It got it wrong without doing a web search. And then when I said, "You've gotten it wrong. Search for this information," it recanted completely and gave me the correct answer. So basically, the training model,
all of these, when you tell it it's wrong, I'm going to start when it tells me the right answer, telling it it's wrong to see if it still says, "Oh, my bad," because it always does.
It probably will. It will be an interesting question. I have sometimes I have done that a couple of times. Where I've asked it a question that I knew was, I said, is it true that XYZ? And they each time, when I say something, is the sky green or something, they're like, "No, it's not." So
good.
They don't always agree with you, but it would be interesting if it was questionable. But the point being that usually ChatGPT is pretty good at interpreting what you write and deciding whether it needs to do a search or it can just answer it from its training model.
I asked Perplexity while we're talking, when was the iPad introduced? It gave me 9 sources that told me and then spit out the answer with little bullets telling me which one I could link to. Great. Mm-hmm. I asked Claude the same question, and it said, "I believe the original iPad was introduced in 2010. But then I said, "Okay, search the web to tell me when the iPad was introduced and show me your source." And it's been spinning ever since I wrote that. It hasn't answered the question. And when I asked ChatGPT the same question, it simply gave me the answer with no result. So I'm not getting a search result. It's not a search. There must be some way to actively tell it search versus.
So when was I have this clever little iPad released. I created this Keyboard Maestro macro.
Nice.
That sends the same query to all 4 engines.
Oh, nice.
In different split panes in Arc, which can open 4 split panes at once.
Oh, nice.
And so I can do that. Sometimes fails on the 4th one. So for me anyway, with ChatGPT, keep in mind I do have a Plus account for ChatGPT. I don't know if that helps encourage
I
it
do
to
too.
search.
The $20, not the $200
Yeah,
one.
yeah, right. No, that's ridiculous. Basically, it did a search. ChatGPT did not.
ChatGPT just
sorry,
gave me the
Claude
answer.
did not. ChatGPT did.
I didn't. When I asked it, it just gave me the answer. It didn't give me anything. I did stop Claude from spinning, trying to answer my question of do a web search. So, and I stopped it, and then I said, "Was that a hard question?" And then it gave me the web search version, where I've got a link to the to where the sources are. So it sounds like it decides on the fly whether or not it wants to do a web search or not.
Yes.
You're not specifically saying do a web search in your query.
No, I am not. Although I said I've had to force Claude to do that a few times. My experience is that if you ask questions that involve that feel like there's details in them, it will usually do it. They'll mostly do searches. And but you can always say, do a search. You kind of like, why didn't you search? Search for this information, or give me references. So that's sometimes if it does it, I was like, I want references for that. And then
sounds like I need a text expander snippet to start my my queries when I want to do that. You answered my main question was, is there like a different tab I'm supposed to be on in these, or is there a setting where I can tell it? You have to sometimes instruct it to do it, except for Perplexity.
Partly, I say that it's not really an issue. I mean, I was somewhat taken aback because I'm like, oh no, just do it. Because I've had first Perplexity and then ChatGPT set as my default search engine, and for a long time, and that's not a problem I've run into.
Okay. It looks like Perplexity's doing it automatically.
I mean, Perplexity certainly, but ChatGPT, same thing. Only very infrequently does it not do a web search, whereas Claude repeatedly needs to be told to do it. And Claude is I mean, they're the newest to add the web search and I think the weakest overall, but there's I think Anthropic's just not, I mean, it may just be early, right? But they may
Anthropic is the makers of Claude.
Of Claude, sorry, yes.
Okay.
They may simply not be wanting to emphasize that at the moment yet.
Okay. So in a generic sense, you talk in your article about search engines versus answer engines. And why do you find the answer engines a better way to go?
Quite simply because I want the answer. I mean, literally, if I'm asking a question, I want the answer. I don't want to be given homework.
Yeah. Okay.
Right?
And
I got stuff to do in my life, and I'm asking a question because I want the answer. And if I need to go and do research to get the answer, it just takes a lot more time and clutters up my brain with information I don't need.
You listed 4 separate bullet points that I want to go at least list here because I think they're really well thought out. You said comparing a search engine to an answer engine, it goes from lists to synthesis. Yeah. So a list is just, here's all the things you got to go look at and read and figure out. And synthesis is it just puts it together to answer the question. From keywords to natural language, that one's really big. So you're not having to put quotes around things and try to guess how it wants it to be written. You could just write it in natural language and get the answer.
Right.
From isolated lookups to conversations, that's the biggest thing. Is it's not 10-minute Tom or 10-second Tom in 50 first dates. Instead, you're able to have a conversation. Like if it gets slightly off or like, oh, no, I'm sorry. I wanted that answer for Hindenburg on the Mac, not on the PC. And it'll go, okay, no problem. I'll give you that answer. And then finally from raw results to smart summaries. And it's that summary level where you start and then you go, okay, let me look at the source to make sure that's a valid source. And did it really say what you told me?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. No, basically there's an evolution here, right? And most people probably don't remember the things I started the article with in terms of Archie, which was searching for FTP sites, and Veronica, Jughead and Veronica were searching Gopher servers. But they could just search file names, like that was all they could search on. And so when we got into being able to do full text search with Alta Vista, and then Yahoo building these directories, like the concept, or sort of the approaches for how we look for and acquire information have been evolving on the internet.
Sure.
And we've been kind of stuck at the search engine approach for a while, although even Google for many years now realized that people don't want to do homework. So if you search on, the weather or a flight arrival times or things like that, Google will just give you the answer.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It doesn't make you go somewhere else. And this was a big deal. I mean, we don't think about it now, but boy, the companies that put out that information who were getting tons of search hits from Google, they were really mad that Google stole all their traffic.
Right.
And but
it's a funny thing. I'm sympathetic to them, and yet I just want the answer.
This is the problem. I mean, this is the real tension, is that what's good for the user is not necessarily what's good for the provider of the information.
Yeah, and you end your article with talking about that a little bit and about the evolution of technologies over time. This is what happens. But I think it's a little bit different in this case because these tools are training on the content that's been created by separate websites and individual humans and corporations. And if they're disincentivized to create that content, then all of the answer engines are going to get stupider, right?
Well, the question is, who will be disincentivized and why? And we assume, we only think about, the New York Times, the Washington Post, whatever. But the fact of the matter is, do you do what you do because you're going to earn money every time someone reads it? Or do you do it because you want to create this information?
I'm in a lucky position that I can afford to do it for the love of the craft. That I don't have to feed my family based on it. But there's a lot of people who do feed their families based on what they create.
And, for 35 years, I've been creating tidbits. But you know what? I don't earn money based on the specific text I write. I earn money by creating value for people. And so that, at this point, we started advertising on the internet. We did the first advertising on the internet in 1992. And I'm a little sorry. Probably would have happened anyway, but
I apologize.
but I think advertising is a scourge. I mean, it's horrible. And no one likes it. At best we put up with it because we understand it's how many of these companies make money. But it's not good. It's exploitive. I mean, it's not saying, I have provided something of value to you. Now let me suck your eyeballs out. It's not like, it's
with
not
the
like
foot fungus ad.
Right, precisely. Belly fat ad. Like, yeah.
Oh my God, the two of those. That's the two worst on the internet. Make it stop.
Yeah. So and we were talking earlier, about sort of the rise of email newsletters in the last 5 years or so. Well, part of that is because you can actually get people who value what you write and are willing to pay you for that information. And so it's a different business model. Basically business models change all the time. And the internet advertising model that we were so used to. I mean, the click-through rate on ads is something like, last I looked, which is now a couple of years out of date, so it's probably gone down by a lot. Something like 0.8%, 0.1%, I don't forget exactly. It's incredibly low. People don't do this. They don't want these things. And yet we've got enough scale that you can still earn enough money at this for this model to keep existing. So in that sense, I just don't have much sympathy. Like, models change. The buggy whip manufacturers are unhappy. The classified ad people who did newspapers, they're unhappy. The internet ate them.
Yeah. Well, and another thing to think about, especially in the context of what Tidbits creates, and I will sit behind you as your little sister going, me too, is that if you're creating content that hasn't been written before,
yes,
I think there's still a place for it. So the example, I did a conversation with Bart about Stack Overflow, and someone did a study of Stack Overflow and how the number of answers has plummeted since ChatGPT started. However, what they sort of came to the conclusion was the answers are already there.
Yeah.
Like, somebody's asked this 300 times. Like, most of the links are already asked and answered here, already asked and answered here, already asked and answered here. But the languages that are new, they're still getting just as much traffic and answers, and people are discussing it. But JavaScript hasn't changed that much lately. I mean, maybe ES6, you're all excited there's a new flurry of information about it. But the answers, asked and answered, we don't need to write it again. And for ChatGPT or Perplexity or Claude to have swallowed that up and regurgitate it for you more quickly than you can find the answer over on Stack Overflow, I think that's fine. But if you're generating new content, new ideas, what you're talking about is something that hasn't already been regurgitated, I think that's where the value might be.
And if you think about it, also, again, we have this kind of live in a capitalist society, this concept that you have to sell your content. But in fact, vast amounts of content is not created with any sort of profit motive in mind at all. I mean, people aren't posting to Tidbits Talk because they expect to get paid for it. There's people there who are just answering questions with great information.
They like to share their knowledge.
I mean, most of academia not really doing. When professors publish books, they're really not expecting to earn any money. I mean, it just doesn't happen that way most of the time. Papers, scientific papers, same thing. Publisher, the authors don't earn squat. The journals might earn a lot, but that's a different problem. Government information, vast swaths of information coming out of the government at all times without the words climate change in them anywhere now. So, it's, I mean, that's where, a vast amount of this data comes from is, nonprofit, just non-commercial sources. And that's fine too. So that's why, we talked a little about this last time, this concept of these large language models as cultural and social technologies, because they allow people to engage with information created by other people.
Yeah.
There's a medium of the chatbot, but there was a medium with Wikipedia or with Google or with writing. They're all cultural technologies. And so it's a way of communicating information from one person or many people to someone else. And so there's no question that the business models are going to change surrounding this. They kind of have to. But I think it's in the service of doing better stuff for people. Like, again, you want the answer. You don't want homework.
Now, you talk in your article also about procedural differences between searches and answers. I think most of us have a lot of experience with asking Google for the answer to something. But how is it different with the answer engines? How do you approach it differently in terms of procedure?
Well, so with Google, we become so accustomed to it, we don't even really think about how we do it. But those who do a lot of searches, anyway, we've just kind of built in this concept of distilling what our question will be to the most likely keywords that are going to hit what we want. And you do that because there's no point in adding the other words in. They're not going to be used anyway. The keywords are all that matter to Google. However, with the answer engines, you don't want to do that because how you ask the question and how you phrase it will change how it responds. So I'm trying to think of a good example here. If you could very easily ask, I guess what I'm saying is you could very easily ask two different questions that use many of the same keywords, but the question would be different. And an answer engine would understand that because they're very good at that kind of context and give you what you're asking for rather than the pages that might have your relevant keywords, regardless of whether they agree with you or support what you're trying to get or not. And part of the issue here is that keywords have to be uncommon. So, I mean, Apple's the worst here, right? We've got apps called Photos
Shoot
and
me now.
Mail.
Books.
Just the worst.
Yeah.
I mean,
Trying to figure
calendar.
out how to do anything in books to publish content. Yeah, sorry, you're not going to get the answer.
Right. But on the other hand, with a with Google, you'd put in Apple books, or something along those lines. But with
but then put quotes around it in case it looks for Apple and books. You got to put quotes on either side.
Precisely. Whereas with the answer engine, you might say, I'm trying to figure out what is the best app to create an ebook for sale in Apple Books.
Mm-hmm.
And I haven't tested that particular one, but I'm willing to bet that it will answer that pretty effectively, because words like app, not really very useful. Create, pretty blah blah blah. So the Apple Books, again, you'd have to quote it normally, et cetera, et cetera. But this is going to find stuff that's talking about publishing, creating and publishing these, and then it's going to synthesize that into some kind of an answer that will either just answer your question, or it will at least give you somewhere else to go with it, which might be just a follow-up of, oh no, and I don't want to use pages. Oh,
okay.
Well,
okay.
Now then.
Now you're going to get a different answer.
Yeah,
Right.
good luck now. But I used to use iTunes Publisher, but that's no longer available. What is recommended now?
Right. But you could be having that conversation with it as you're going through, instead of having to figure out how to put a minus sign in front of Apple Pages, because you can't just put minus pages. So you got to.
Precisely. So I think that, so there's a little bit of you have to think about what you want. It's really that it's not there. I feel like in some sense with searching, we almost don't think as tightly, because you can sort of refine what you're looking for as you scroll through each of the result pages that you've decided to read, right? Mm-hmm. You're almost, you can put off that question about what you want. It's like, oh no, that's not it, and then you have to go do another search because it's not finding the sort of things you want. Whereas this, so I think a few more seconds of upfront thought about what you're actually asking is useful. And then, again, either refining or expanding within the same conversation so that you don't have to just start over from scratch. You're like,
I'd like people to consider. Yeah, I'd like people to consider this audience is the nerd audience who gets the questions from their friends, or they go on vacation and everybody on the trip figures out that stuff, and then you get a little line out the door asking you how to play with their iPhones. But people will always come to you and say things like, macOS hates me. Can you elaborate a little bit? And so you have to keep drawing out that information from people. So now imagine you're on the other side. You're the one asking the question. And you go in and you ask it, Hindenburg, again, is an application I use on the Mac, but it's got a bigger audience on Windows. So I'll tend to say, how do I do this in Hindenburg? And it'll say, give me an answer, and it'll say things like Control P. I realize, I need to elaborate more. So this person that I'm asking for help needs more information from me. I need to give it more descriptive. It's very rare that I ask the right question to start with. I very often have to give it more information. But there's also a piece of where it gives an answer that isn't, I'm not sure what flavor of wrong you put this in, what category you call it, but like I'll be asking it, is there a way to do auto ducking in Hindenburg, and it'll say, absolutely, you do it like this. And I say, don't see those menus. And I say, oh, I'm on the Mac. It says, oh, well, you should use these menus. And I said, I don't see those menus. And it'll come back and go, yeah, it doesn't have auto ducking. That's a conversation I had.
Yeah.
Well, okay, you could have told me that the first time. Why did you tell me it did have that capability? And so
And
it's
that's a
not
question
perfect.
actually that I would wonder if it was that actually being a search, or was that coming from the model?
I don't remember ever seeing like links to the sources.
Right. Because my, just kind of anecdotal experience with some of the stuff that's often wrong is that the wrong stuff tends to come from the model, because the models are out of date. And also there's a lot more in the model. I mean, when you say you're going to do a search and you're going to find these 10 pages, that's relatively constrained space, right? So if the answer is in that space, it's probably going to get it right.
Yeah.
And so the
This
question
is
is
a
how
tool
good the
that
search
isn't
is.
documented, by the way, except in little videos.
Yeah,
Every
that's,
answer to every question is a video, so there's no way to find the answers by searching. Because I started there.
yeah. I'm going to be really curious to see when. I mean, obviously, we do get video links from all the search engines and answer engines at this point. But I'm going to be really. I don't know to what extent they are extracting the full text of what's said and basing it
Oh.
on that. That would be really interesting.
That would be fun.
So
Yeah.
the one thing I will say that's kind of, I find, or is why I'm doing this is kind of fun, is the whole AI space is moving so freaking fast. And so, something like, oh yes, we've now transcribed every YouTube video, every video that we can find, we've transcribed and built in, like, wouldn't be surprised, and so now we can now do full text search. And Google's probably done this already, but
Yeah, I mean, because we started 43 minutes ago, so they're probably done with it by now, right?
Right,
Since we
precisely.
started.
But so so like because like I same thing, like I find being sent to YouTube videos, unless I'm looking for literally a video about how to perform some physical action, I hate videos, just hate them. Because I
Yeah.
read so much faster. And so,
Right, I can jump to what I want to know. I mean, it literally, if you're trying to look for what kind of tool do I need to get a hold of this valve on the back of my sink? Okay, that's where videos real handy. I want to see it.
Right. Anything else drives me up the wall, because it's for like a 20-minute video. You guys, like, you got to be kidding. I am not watching a 20-minute video to find out that they didn't answer my question anyway.
A lot of times they have they start at a certain point where the answer might be, but a lot of times that's not true.
Yeah.
One of the other big values I saw in your article was you went through choosing an answer engine, and you gave let's see, you did 4 of them: Perplexity, ChatGPT, more than that. Perplexity, ChatGPT, Google AI Mode, U.com, and Claude. And you gave the pricing. But the other thing you gave me, which I'm going to feed into a tip back to you, is you gave the search URL for each one. So like perplexity.ai/search $Q equals %S. I use a tool called Keyword Search, and I wrote an article about it that I'll link in the show notes. It's a plugin for Safari that allows you to create essentially like a text expander snippet for how to search a different site. So in order to search podfeet.com, I type SP space and whatever I want to search for, and it's doing a Google search into my website. So I immediately used all of these. I created one called SPerp for search perplexity, and now I can search perplexity from the web with just two characters.
Yeah. No, that's why I did it. The Chrome, in Chrome, you can just that sort of thing's built in terms of the little.
I thought you said it was an extension.
For Safari, you need it, but for Chrome, you can, when you define a search engine, you can define a shortcut key.
But you have to define that search. You have to always be using that search engine, or can it do it on the fly based on what you put beforehand?
You can do as many as you want.
Okay.
So like I have Amazon set. So if I type A space, it'll do an Amazon search.
Okay. So this isn't really a search engine. It's searching. It's using something to search that site.
Yeah,
Or
yeah.
the
Basically,
search
it's just
built into that
directing
site.
search to a specific specific service. But
Yeah,
the
you talked
keyword
about
search
one
one
called
is
customized search engine.
right. So what I was going
On
with
Safari?
customized search engine is that makes it the default because I find that I don't actually usually want to search other ones often enough that it's worth doing that. There's very few. Basically, Amazon, Wikipedia. Those are about it.
Don't you ever search tidbits?
I do, but I'm actually on the Tidbits site most of the time. I mean, I have Tidbits in a pin tab in Arc, so I don't tend to do that.
And you have a good search?
Yeah, we
Because
have
I
a
have
pretty
a
good.
terrible search on mine.
Yeah, yeah.
Which is why I use Google to search podfeet.com.
Yeah, the search I've got on Tidbits is pretty good. I think it's based on Jetpack. But
Okay.
yeah,
Actually, I forgot. I did fix search on podfeet.com. I think it's actually doing it correctly. No, I shouldn't downplay that. Tell you not to.
So for me, I just want to do basically the equivalent of the location bar, as I want my default search to just work. And so that's what's hard to do in Safari. I mean, Apple does not make it easy, mess with these things in Safari. You have to have an extension, and the same with Firefox. Although someone told me there's actually something in Firefox really deep in the settings of the command line settings that you can make it so you can edit the search engines in Firefox too. But I find that annoying. It's like, let me put in my own damn search engine.
I'm going to check out customized search engine for Safari. That would be interesting to switch it for a while. By the way, Bart just did an article last week on the No Silicast about Kagi is what he uses for search.
Yeah.
That's where you pay with your dollars instead of your eyeballs. And he's actually been using it for well over a year, so it's stuck as a good one.
I've heard very nice things about Kagi. And I think they've got something called Kagi Assistant, which is this kind of AI answer thing as well too. But it just sort of falls into the category of yet another thing that I would have to pay for, which I didn't have to, so I didn't.
Yeah, and it's a search engine, not by default. It isn't an AI.
Right. I mean, what I find kind of interesting, Perplexity. The difference between Perplexity and ChatGPT, which are by far my most functional ones, because as I said, what I did in the article was I ran the same search across 4 of them at once and then actually rated them. And so I was able to get, just a simple average of how successful was this. And ChatGPT and Perplexity were the best 2 by far. But I've slightly preferred ChatGPT because Perplexity, as much as you can continue a conversation, it's a little bit, it's less conversational. ChatGPT really is, which is more conversational in some way that I somehow prefer that. I can't quite say why.
Feels it.
Yeah, it just feels somewhere, oh yeah. And so it's common for me now in Arc to open a split view of 2 things, what I'm writing, and then a conversation with ChatGPT and the other split view, so that I can talk about the topic with ChatGPT while I'm writing, which in essence is a search, right? But it's a search that has been informed by the entire conversation we've been having, rather than, again, these one-off searches.
Starting over. Yeah, so you assigned the arbitrary Adam Engst scale of 1 to 4, I think.
0 to 3, but yes.
Scientifically. Oh, 1 to 3, 0 to 3. Sorry,
because I wanted 0 to be like, you just got it wrong. Like, you completely biffed this.
No,
you're not even in the ballpark. And then 3 is that answer is completely on topic. You got everything right. I can't argue with it. And then 1 and 2 are well, you kind of got the answer right.
Good effort.
But there was a bunch of other stuff that was wrong. That might be a 1. And 2 might be, you got the answer right, but you didn't explain it very well. Or, you made
it too hard. Too much work for me.
Too much work, or just you didn't say very much, so that, there could have been, when I compare what this answer engine said to this one, they did a better job. I'm just happier reading this.
Okay. Okay. So you ran all 4 search engines at the same time, right?
Yep.
Or answer engines.
Yeah.
And you assigned, how many questions did you ask?
Oh, that's a good question. What am I at? I kept it up because it's kind of fun.
We're going to need to see the spreadsheet. We're going to need to see your math.
It's linked in the article. So I have now 47, I think. Nope, 46 questions.
Oh, you did put it in the. Look at that. There's a Google sheet.
Yeah, you can see what I search on.
I'm going to check your math too and make sure you did that. Oh, no, it's not gonna let me. It's
Oh
read
man, I hope
only.
I got it right. It's just an average.
No.
Well,
Actually, averages are harder than you think. I'm going to tell an anecdote that has nothing to do with the entire topic here today, but I was running a 360 survey for all my employees. So they had people, their peers, who would answer questions about them, about their performance. So I had to be the only one who could see the data because I didn't want anybody to know who had scored who what. So I had this spreadsheet and I was doing averages and I was getting the wrong answer. Like somebody would get a 3 from one person, a 2 from the other person, and the average would not be 2.5. And I'll never forget this. I asked this woman, Darlene, who worked for me, I said, okay, I can't let you see any of the data, but this is what's happening. And she goes, oh, somebody probably hit the space bar accidentally, and the value of space is 8. What? How do you know that? How did you figure that out from the little bit of information I gave you? And I went through and I cleared out everything else in the column that looked empty. And sure enough, that's what the problem was. So it's real easy to get the average wrong.
Yeah. Well, in this case, I also did want this is like 0 to be different from null.
Yeah.
So null
good.
doesn't get included, but 0 does. That kind of thing.
Okay.
But yeah. So I mean, you can see, like most of my questions, they're real questions. Is there a faster way of printing a page from Canva than going through the whole share, download PDF, pick a page, download, open PDF, print dance?
So you were just running this while you asked questions that you really needed to know.
Right. I needed to know that. And keep
Now,
in
how
mind,
come-
answer, I don't always win, right? Like the answer to that was no. There is not a way.
But that's the answer.
That was the answer. And like that one, that was back when I was using u.com. And so everyone but Google got that one completely right. And Google completely biffed it. Like just totally wrong. So, it was 3303 for in the scoring for the 4 judges in that one. But
now I know that you've showed that Claude did the worst, but to be fair, Claude only has about a third the number of questions it was asked.
And that's why I say that.
It might not be fair.
It might not be, but it's pretty universally doing badly. Every time I compare it, just about. I mean, if you look, it's only gotten the answer right about a third of the time.
Yeah.
And
not as
it's gotten a couple of real failures.
Questions. Not a fair comparison.
So, as I said, I was clear about this. Do not have as much data about Claude yet. But the real problem with Claude is it's annoying as all get out to work. So the way this works is it opens a tab with this URL, right? And you can build. So when you do that with Claude, it has to prompt you to ask if you mean to send it this prompt. You have to.
So I tried it and it wasn't that. I just had to push the button.
So when I do this, I get this, like you have to approve the prompt, and then I have to go and click on the send button. So it requires 2 clicks for everything in my ARC specific, Keyboard Maestro macro setup thing. And so I was just like, oh, you're just irritating beyond belief every time. In
Perplexity, I had to click away. No, I don't want to log in.
Oh, I guess I'm logged in. So
Must
one
be
thing I
logged
didn't
in,
mention, actually, that's an interesting point. So one thing I didn't mention, and I think Claude will do it. I haven't actually checked in Claude as much because I've been using Claude as much. But both ChatGPT and Perplexity maintain a library of all of your queries.
Oh yeah, Claude does too.
Which
it's fantastic.
But
you have to be logged in. Yeah,
right. You have to be logged in. But it's searchable, and so there are times when I will think, I need this information which I have asked for in the past and gotten. Rather than do another search, is what you would do with Google or the like, I will search my library.
It can also do more than that. And this is how I figured out that it was really keeping this on me, as I asked it a question and it said, well, you have Keyboard Maestro on your Mac. Why don't you just use that?
Dummy.
Like, how do you know that? And it said, well, you told me, stupid. It didn't say stupid, but it told me, it said, you asked me a question about it. You already told me you have it. I was like, oh, look at that.
Yeah.
Look at what it knows.
Yeah.
Be careful what
right.
you tell it.
Yeah. So yeah, there is a little bit of that. You probably don't want to tell your deepest, darkest secrets to these things, just in general.
Yeah.
Then again, you shouldn't type your deepest, darkest secrets to anything.
Anybody.
Even putting it on your computer is probably a little on the stupid side. Just saying.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the fact of the matter is that I find that library actually quite helpful. At least ChatGPT has the concept of a temporary search, which does not trigger the library.
Oh.
So if you did want to do
Interesting.
something that didn't get saved for some reason, you could do that. And there are probably a few searches that I have not put through my in my spreadsheet here because people didn't need to know.
What's that rash about?
Yeah,
How's that
right.
fungus
Look at this
coming
picture.
along?
No. But yes, I mean it's it is interesting to go through this and see again where some of these things come from, and how they do, and I said it's not 100%. It's not like they are all just 100% comparable, and
Right,
sometimes
right.
yes, sometimes no.
I think this is a great resource, and I'm definitely going to refer back to the article, which, of course, again, will be linked in the show notes. And I'm not going to give you the link to his Google spreadsheet because I want you to go read his article. What I find fascinating is this has been up since the 18th, I think it was.
Yeah.
And today's the 23rd, and more than half of the page is people commenting back to you in Tidbits Talk. So
Yeah.
those are embedded in his web pages, but it's also part of Tidbits Talk. And so you're getting a lot of people interested in this topic and getting a lot of great discussion. So that's really
And this
fun.
was a 4,000 word article to start with, so
Yeah.
this was not an easy
yeah.
article to write.
You used up a lot of ink.
So I mean, it is, and people on the whole, I was curious how it was going to be received, and I think people actually are more open to it, or have already been using these things more than I had anticipated, which I was kind of pleased about. This was not,
Yeah.
it was not quite as radical a concept as I had feared it might be.
Yeah, that makes me think. I do a lot of user group talks, and I haven't done any user group talks where I talk about AI because there we were discussing. I think it was offline about maybe it wasn't the age demographic
Oh yeah.
and of our audience, and user groups tend to be definitely pitch older. And I'm very curious to see whether they're terrified running away or they think it's awesome sauce. That'd be a fun discussion to do.
You never know. I mean, my father-in-law, who is technical, he was a systems architect at NCR for many years, various spin-offs of NCR over the years, Teradata and whatnot. But he was a fairly early user of Perplexity. He was using it last summer after I told him about it at some
Okay.
point. He's like, "This is great. I love this." And currently, he and some other guy at the retirement community where they're living are building this honkin' database of I'm not even sure of what. I think it's a residence and stuff like blah 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 in Google Sheets, with the whole thing being managed via app scripts. So it's a ton of JavaScript
Okay.
programming in Google stuff, which
Nice.
I mean, he's done programming, but he's never used this, and so he's using ChatGPT heavily to
learn how to
build
do
this
it.
stuff. And so I'm like, well,
He
more
might
power
not
to
be
you.
mainstream. I'm just saying, he's one of us.
Yeah, he's one of us, but nonetheless, I was still like, okay, this is clearly not doesn't just you don't know. But again, I think it's going to be interesting. You notice we're not seeing anyone adding these things to the default search engine menus.
Mhm.
And
Well, that's because they're not being paid to do it, Adam.
well, yeah, because there's $20 billion on Apple's balance sheet that's coming from Google every year. And and Google's making $175 billion out of Google search, and et cetera, et cetera. Mozilla only makes like $550 million, but Mozilla's small potatoes, so it's still most of their budget. Search
we'll
search
see
is
when they
big
let us
business,
start
and
doing
that's
that.
part of it. Is that with these things, you're not being fed ads. You're mostly paying for it if you want it. Perplexity you can get for free, and they've got these sponsored questions, which I find a little weird, but I hadn't even noticed they were there until I was researching it, honestly.
Interesting.
So I don't know how effective that
So
might be.
Adam's got all the prices. He's got the search query search. He's got all of the data, and it's a fantastic article. It did take me a while to pour all the way through it, but I was riveted through the whole thing. So I think everybody
How does
else
it come
will
out?
be.
How does it Butler did it.
Yeah. What's the ending story? Well, if is there anything else we've maybe missed on this?
I don't think so. This is it was a really interesting exercise, and I sort of have to decide whether how much longer I want to keep going with what I've been calling quad search. Running all my searches through this. But I guess one of the things I just want to say is that it's worth trying a couple of them. To the extent that price isn't an issue. And this is my sort of next area of research a little bit is that why do you like one model over another? I don't know. What is it that makes
What is that
people
gut that you
prefer
said?
Claude over ChatGPT or, ChatGPT 4.0 over, ChatGPT 4.5? Like, I don't know. And I don't know what the answer to that is. And I don't know how you find out because there's all these...
Or measure.
There's all these benchmarks. But benchmarks are sort of wrong because this is an interaction. And although you're not interacting with a person, it's much closer to that. I mean,
it's a more intimate conversation.
I don't measure our conversation and go, well, Allison scored a 3 on the conversation here, but down here she was only a 2, and we disagreed about that point, so 0 on that one, and Allison's average for this conference. You don't do that with people, right? You decide whether or not you trust them and you like them and you enjoy them, and to the extent that that's true, you want to talk to them more. And I think the same is true of the chatbots.
Yeah, that'll be interesting to see where you go with that. That's pretty fun.
And I've got a way about it.
All right, well,
I've got a theory for how the chatbots are going to help me build this too. It's going to be a tool. No promises until I get it done.
Best. Oh, the only other thing, have you published your Keyboard Maestro macro that does this quad search?
Oh, I have not. If anyone wanted it, they could have it. That'd
be fun to see.
It's not terribly difficult, but
well, we don't need to do it real time, but if you felt like sharing that with me, that would be cool.
Yeah, I will share it. The only tricky part of it was I'm not very good at shell scripting, but it turns out the best way to get a single string into Keyboard Maestro that then you work with was a shell script.
A shell script, sure.
And
then you just have the engines do it for you.
Right. And ChatGPT wrote the shell script for me, which was, blah, 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 bin bash C, Python 3, C, import lib, parse, blah, blah, blah. No clue. No clue at all. But it wrote it for me for Keyboard Maestro. Because again,
right.
Keyboard Maestro has a fabulous discourse discussion forum where, people on Keyboard Maestro, the Keyboard Maestro forum they're astonishing.
It's the best forum. It's the best form ever. Yeah, absolutely.
Just
that's
amazing.
Why your tools know the answer. I've asked a lot of questions about Keyboard Maestro because why should I bother trying to figure it out? Because I could get the answer in 5 seconds from one of the engines.
Precisely. And
all right, Adam.
That was that.
I've got to cut us off.
That was the only trick there. So once I did that, the rest of it was pretty easy. And it's just monkeying through keyboard shortcuts and pauses and whatnot. So.
Yeah, pauses. That's always the
But you got to use ARC because otherwise you can't get 4 panes next to each other.
Ah, right. All right, Adam, this was a blast as always. I always end up with smile muscle ache when I'm done talking to you. As always, only nerds could really enjoy this, but I had a lot of fun, and we'll talk to you probably in another month.
Sounds great. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, I'm all proud of this 20 years, and Adam Engst says, hold my beer. Anyway, that's going to wind us up for this week. Did you know you can email me at allison@podfeed.com anytime you like? You got a question or suggestion, just send it on over. Remember, everything good starts with podfeed.com. You can follow me on Mastodon at podfeed.com/Mastodon. If you want to listen to the podcast on YouTube, you can go to podfeed.com/YouTube. And if you want to join the conversation, you can join our Slack community at podfeed.com/Slack, where you talk to me and all of the other lovely NosillaCastaways. Well, all of them that are there. You can support the show at podfeed.com/Patreon or with a one-time donation at podfeed.com/donate, where you can use Apple Pay or any credit card. Or you can use podfeed.com/PayPal like George from Tulsa did this week. So many great ways to do it. And don't forget to go get your 20th anniversary shirt at podfeet.com/shop. And if you want to join in the fun of the live show, come next week for the 20th anniversary show over at podfeet.com/live on Sunday nights at 5 p.m. Pacific time, and join the friendly and enthusiastic NosillaCastaways. Thanks for listening, and stay subscribed.